through bolted through masonry or through bolted into wood. Lag bolted, illegal. That's it, and then you got to lay to the ground. That's it. There's no other magical, there's no helicopters holding fire escapes in the air, there's no force fields holding fire escapes in the air. I'm going to cover, in the drawings that I'm about to show you, I'm going to cover 100% of every fire escape ever built in the United States. There's nothing else out there built differently. Except there was a fire escape that I saw one guy did with a suspension cable. It was spectacular. It was tied up to the top, it had a reverse angled suspension, but those are weird ones, but they were engineered. So, the life of rust, ready? This is actually evidence from the case that we did for the fireman that got hurt on the tread. And when I was walking out here, I'm already falling. This is the kind of rust. 2 years later, we're falling through the fire escape when we're doing a reinspection. So that's how long the case took and all that other stuff. 2 years later. So we have to do this to basically show the history of rust and do this for the metallurgists. So let me tell you how rust begins. There's no fire escape factory out there. There isn't one fire escape factory. Okay? Nobody wants to be, there's ironwork companies out there that do fire escape, there's no fire escape service. There's no fire escape company out there. I claim to be one, so I'm the only one. But otherwise, anybody that's going to build a fire escape for you is an ironworker or a welding guy that builds fire escapes. But they have this other trade that they really focus on. So, but I'm going to show you what basically how I build a tread, a rail. There's no Home Depot that you go there and buy fire escape components. It doesn't exist. The only thing you can get now is grating already pre-made, and treads already pre-made because they cut it from grating, and then some grating companies will prefab treads. Otherwise, all ironworkers and welding guys custom make every fire escape you're ever going to see. So let's start out with a piece of steel, 20 feet long. We make supports, treads, railings, we make everything from that. So we take 2 pieces of naked steel and we cut into these little members, and let's make a simple rail or a simple tread connection. When I take 2 pieces of steel and I put them together, do I prime it inside before I bolt it or weld it?
Yeah.
No, nobody does. I'm talking 50 to 75 years ago. Did anybody prime or weld? Prime those 2 naked pieces of steel? No. So then when they put those 2 naked pieces of steel and they bolted or riveted, they basically then encapsulate it with paint. Did they get every nook and cranny? Did they dip it in a tank or something? So then as soon as it gets out there, it gets out into the world, and it's put on a building on the side and it's going to get rain and snow on it, guess what happens? And I'm using a tread. This applies to supports, rails, any connection with 2 pieces of steel that used to be 20 feet long got cut up to make this. So what you get immediately within the first year, and as long as it's fully painted, you're going to get some surface rust. That's what it looks like. That's called surface rust. Has it penetrated the connection and separated the connection in any way? Can you wire brush that and repaint it? You're supposed to every 3 to 5 years or every 5 to 7 years, because paint only lasts how long? Well, read the can of Rust-Oleum. It only says, in perfect conditions, you must fully repaint the fire escape, including the primer, every 7 years. Being done? Ever done? No. So, I'm supposed to come in as the owner of the building, and I'm supposed to scrape that away, and I'm supposed to give it another coat of paint to keep it from penetrating. Do they do that? No. So the next thing that happens is you get the fire escape that, I've let it go for about 10, 15, 20 years, and guess what happened to the connection? That little piece of rust did what? Had all day, every day, 365 days, it took off 1 day, to do what? Eat the connection, because I need water and sun. Do I get that all day long? It gets through the connection. That connection could be 1/16 penetrated, 1/8 penetrated, or 1/4 inch penetrated. But anybody that's in the structural field that says when 2 pieces move apart from each other, what happens to that river or that bolt that has been now stretched? 1/16, 1/8, quarter or more. What happens? Is it structurally sound? Any engineers in the field? Can you chime in? Can you chime? Is that a correct statement or is that a misstatement? That any connection that has separated at least a 16th has already compromised the bolt.
Yeah, it's called rust jacking.
It's a new word. I just learned a new word. Anybody ever heard of rust jacking? Write that down, guy. I don't even know that word. What's it called? Rust jacking? Help me here, man. I gotta learn.
Jacking?
Yes, jacking.
Rust jacking.
Apart.
And that just like ice will tear apart anything. Rust works the same way. It's got all data. It'll rip. Now, if this was a welded connection, this is just a rivet connection. But if I have a weld on the nose of my tread and it rusts, jacket, right? Jacketing?
Jacking.
Oh, jacking, rust jacking. And I had a weld on the nose. A year ago, I welded the nose, and it grew another 16 What happens to my weld? Rips, tears, snaps,
Shouldn't have
right?
been welded in the first place.
Well, you can't imagine how many guys are welding rust in a connection, but if somebody welds a connection that still has rust, rust jacking will rip the new bolt, but it'll also tear the existing weld, right? Because welds don't stretch, welds snap. Bolts will stretch a little bit over time. So if you're ever gonna wrong a client, should I weld the nose of this bad tread, or should I just put in a brand new bolt there? Which one will give me more time? A bolt. So it's still the wrong repair, but if you're gonna wrong a client, don't weld the nose with rust still in it. Just take the bolt out, put a new bolt. Can that be a temporary repair? And I spoke with you about that, Stu. Somebody, you got a fire escape situation, very horrible situation. Client has no money, it's on the foreclosure, you name the story, they're gonna come at you, right? Can I go to a tread, take out the bolt, put in a brand new bolt, and the rust stays there, so am I certifying it or just making it functional for the meantime? That's an emergency repair. Is Stu gonna remove the violation because of that change, of that bolt with the rust still in there?
Not this guy.
No, but he's gonna suspend that violation and basically revisit this fire escape every 1 to 3 months. Why? Because that building's in foreclosure, the bank's taking it over, little old lady syndrome, you name the scenario. What he wants is this fire escape functional for 2 people, a tenant or first fireman. When it finally gets done, and that's gonna be a certification, load test and or certification, that could be 1 month away, it could be 5 years away, we don't know. Because you got all kinds of landlords here that are slumlords, you got all kinds of situations, but can we immediately get a functionality repair initiated? Now on that, I'm sure there's gonna be tons of disclaimers by the engineers, by the city, and by the vendor that puts the blame 100% solely upon this fire escape that went from a red tag to a yellow tag. If anything does occur on that, who's liable, who's got all the liability? The owner. And that's gonna be in writing. In the meantime, when you've got a violation on the fire escape, which he's gonna visit every 30 days or every 60 days, whatever he chooses, does the engineering firm need to go back there and verify that the connections, everything still looks hunky-dory? You know what I'm saying? They have to go back, so it's sort of built in. We also talked about this with today's economics. You think a lot of the vendors that want 20 grand for that job will work out a deal with the owner to say, listen, I'll fix your fire escape. You can pay me over the next 6 months, 12 months, 3 months, whatever the deal's gonna be. And basically, I'll come back to this fire escape as a filler whenever I can. So I'll immediately do the functionality repair right now. And then I'll fix this thing over the next 12 months at my leisure. And if I fix it earlier or not, it doesn't matter, because you're definitely gonna pay me $1,000 a month, whatever the deal is. And then upon completion, that's when we're gonna get the certification from the engineers. That's when we get the violation removed. So you got a lot of vendors right now that are willing to offer in-house financing. And whether they finish early or not, you just turned a temporary repair into a full repair that now is used as a filler by these guys who might be idle in the middle of the middle of December. But it's functional for your tenants and for the firemen to get in, okay? History. More rust. This happened on that Peter video. As it grew, guess what happens? Because a lot of times as it grows, it's actually sitting on top of the rivet, and that's why it doesn't pop. When you come down the stairs, it doesn't pop. But as soon as you get a 1/4 inch on these rivets, and it moves beyond the rivet that it was resting upon, what happens when you put your foot on it? This. So as soon as you see any form of penetration on the connection, tread, supports, rails, they're compromised. The bolt has been stretched, it's compromised, it's got to be replaced. There's no reinforcement of a connection that has rust in it. You never reinforce a connection that has rust. But a connection that's good to excellent, you can reinforce it in lieu of a load test. Do we agree with that, engineers? Is that agreeable in theory or not? What do you think? I got a 50 to 75-year-old tread connection. The square head bolts, all the rivets are perfect, they're in pristine condition. There's no evidence of any deterioration. And I'm not load testing it, but I blow a hole in the middle of the tread and I put a new bolt. I put in either 2 3/8 to back up the existings, or I put in a big 1/2 inch, let's say. on that single tread. Now, will you sign off on that tread that's been reinforced? It has good to excellent condition, rivets and or square head bolts showing no evidence of deterioration anywhere, above, below. And you're gonna seal it from above with silicone?
Any smart engineer wouldn't sign off on it, because when you're load testing that, you're not just testing that tread, you're testing the whole stair system.
Right, but we're talking about, we're just gonna isolate right to this tread. So, with a reinforced tread, do you feel comfortable signing off on it as a certification?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
So it's, because you said, you've done a verification process, right? The rivet and the square heads are in good to excellent condition, not fair, must be in good to excellent, and you backed yourself up by putting in that, if it's a single bolt, let's say a good half-inch bolt in that tread. You reinforced it, so you've basically nullified, and now you're starting to step into what's called certification process, right? You're certifying that one tread. Is that good? I'm not talking about the whole staircase yet. You good with that? You get to the stringer tops and the stringer bottoms, the shoes, the holders, the hangers, whatever you want to call them, and they've got one side that's got perfectly good, they're usually half-inch or bigger. But again, they're 50 to 75 years old, and you say, well, blow me a hole and you give me another 5/8 brand new, and blow me a hole, keep the originals. You go to the other side, it's all blown out, it's got rust everywhere. So you totally change those bolts out and put in brand new. Well, you certify that tread in lieu of a load test.
From what you're saying, it sounds like it.
So reinforcement of good to excellent condition, because the only reason why you reinforcement is based on age now, right? The unknown is the age, 50 to 75 years old. And you're not willing to sign off on it, but as soon as you reinforce it, you get a lot more comfortable, right? Otherwise, give me a load test money, right? Just give me some load test money. So what's ever cheaper to the client? What do you think is cheaper to the client? Changing bolts and reinforcing things, or load testing a whole entire staircase?
The bolt. But I gotta point something out. You got this engineer, he says, well, I'm gonna sign off on it, I'll certify it because you swapped out all the hardware. Meanwhile, 8 firemen are climbing up the thing and no one caught a little stress fracture in the stair riser because there wasn't a full load test put on the stairway and it collapses and falls. Who are they gonna go after and sue?
You're true, and that's why they have the word disclaimers. The disclaimers that we stopped getting into is now, basically again now with the city, we've changed all the original hardware. He's talking about a stress of a bad piece of steel. Can you put that into your, is that an unknown that you have no choice but to put in, that basically the actual 50 to 75-year-old steel, the only true test for that is going to be an actual load test?
Yeah.
Now, can you also do what's called a mix? Can you load test a portion of the fire escape and rebolt everything else to keep the cost down?
Why not just...
Can you mix it up?
I don't think anyone would take full responsibility or ownership for fire escape unless they've done load testing.
Here we go.
Because
Load testing is the 100% mark with no disclaimers.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get into refurbishing a fire escape, he's bringing up just one last piece that we're not able to tell, and that is what the actual steel members that's 50 to 75 years old.
So why not just load test them all and get rid of this gray area of, is it okay or is it not? Just require a load test.
Now it's back to the city. What does the city, because don't forget, everything is based on the cost of the client, but we're basically saying, option 1 is load test.
Yeah.
Option 2 is refurbishment in lieu of a load test. So the only disclaimer that you're gonna have, and that's one of the things we were gonna cover, is just the steel piece itself, right? So if all of a sudden the city says to you, we'll take either a load test, or we'll take a certification that basically is a refurbishment, all the original hardware, and we'll allow you to have, the only disclaimer is the steel member itself cannot be identified unless it's load tested. And I think we talked about this too. What's the recommendation? What's my cycle of recommendation on the load test on a fire escape to eliminate that gray area?
The City of Portland right now, our intended or current policy is that we actually visualize or visually inspect the fire escape if it looks bad, and that's in quotes, a lot of interpretation by the inspector. It gets load tested now. This is the time for the engineers to step in and companies come in, do the evaluation, do the repairs, do the load testing, and Ed's been through that, so several of you guys, on a bunch of them at this point. Initially, several years ago, that was going to be a 5-year test cycle. When we discovered how much it was costing, we backed that off a little bit and went to a 10-year cycle right now. And now we're working with the state to redo the fire code itself so that we can actually have that statewide as opposed to just Portland. and we're in the process of redeveloping that language, so we'll end up with something that may include the confidence testing in lieu of that load test at 10 years. Something may push that out further. We may see a 20-year cycle or something, but there's still going to be the initial starting point. Our office has not yet stepped up to the plate and said everybody's going to do it right now. At this point, we're in the process of these guys in the blue and white shirts up here going out, doing the site visit. If it looks bad, it's now. If it doesn't look bad, it looks passable, whether it be pig with lipstick paint or not. If the inspector is comfortable with it, we're going to give them up to 5 years from the date of this inspection. So if Rick goes out today and does it, and he's generous, he gives them up to 5 years. It's 5 years from the day they'll have to have it done. So you guys will be seeing a lot more work across the next 5 years. That's the good and bad news of it. The concept is relatively sound, but it has a very big nasty piece of that visual inspection and our inspectors making that call. It's not based on any good sound engineering practice. It is very much interpretive at this level, and that's one of the issues that AJ and the state committee are working on, trying to figure out just how we're putting this thing back together. We also know that we cannot simply go out and tell everybody that has a bloody fire escape that they've got to test them right now, because you guys would be very happy, but only for about the first 2 weeks. And then you'd be ticked at us. And yeah, that's there. Economics being what they are, we have concerns. Structural considerations, we have concerns. A lot of our fire escapes in Portland have been beat upon. The hammer testing that Cisco was showing earlier, we used a 24-ounce ball peen, and for a long time, we beat them to death. We got a lot of repairs done on a lot of pieces, but that did not include the load test. So that's our big concern at this point, is how do we get to where we're at? How do we take this to the next step, and how do we make some continuity out of it?
And I'll just add, my recommendation that we put to the city is that fire escapes, based on age, be load tested at least once every 25 years. So as soon as they pass a load test, sometime in their lifetime, so if they're 50 years old, 75 years old, if they're 75 to 100 years old, immediately they must load test immediately. Then the cycle for them is every 25 years for the load test, but they must pass a confidence test every 5 years. So that should answer some of the metal issues. Then as the fire escapes get younger and younger, they have to, and here's the reason why we recommend a 25-year cycle. It's actually not going to be a fire escape inspection, it's going to be a wall envelope inspection. So the engineers now are not only testing in a 25-year cycle the fire escape, but the entire structure. Now you're talking about all the masonry being porous and all these things. So every 25 years, it's not the focus is not the fire escape anymore. The focus is the wall that this fire escape is attached to must be done as one piece. So every 25 years, there's a load test being done on the entire wall of this building that is 75 to 100 years old. Everything that's 25, 50, or 75 years old is subject to to them whether or not they get inspected. But again, every 25 years or sooner, depending on the inspector.
I'm walking up here for a reason. One is to give him the visual flag that we're probably going to take a short break here. The other one was to actually add one piece to what he was talking about on these rivets and the rust penetration coming in here. One of the things we've seen right in here on this rivet and that rust penetration is not just the growth factor and the pressure on the rivet, but literally eating away the rivet. We've had them come down to pencil point tips on them, and we've seen a lot of that over the years.
Rust jacking.
The rust jacking, thank you.
I'll grab you some off my dashboard. I've got some.
They're beautiful, you know.
If you have,
really
you
cool.
can bring them in today, that'd be great.
With a little point on it, and you're going, that used to be
Rust
3 inch
jacket.
diameter, but it just went away. So those are there, so about 5
Yeah,
minutes.
5 minutes, and again, I'll be open for questions, so if anybody wants to come up and ask questions, otherwise, get some more coffee, and I'll start in 5 minutes, in about 5 minutes, but if anybody has any stories, any activities that they want to share, if anybody has a fireman story of somebody who literally almost fell off or got scared, share.
I don't know, the one, your very first one, on your video, the guy that were downtown, like,
There's Pete and John.
yeah, the fire escape, but it's all fixed.
It's all fixed, there you go, it's back in order. That's the good news.
And certified.
And certified. The example, the issue right now is, but the certification is one of the things we talk about. Is it really a certification, or was it an opinion test? Was it a load test, or was it did it get load test that has to be repaired, is that what happened? All right, so your repairs actually got nullified by somebody coming in doing a load test on it. So as a vendor, if these were two separate people, a repair company and a load testing company, as soon as you hand that off and they perform the load test, they basically have, the only thing that come back to bite you ever in the future is bad workmanship of any kind. You missed the bolt or you didn't do something. That can haunt you and bring you back. But otherwise, what we're trying to do is show people that there's a couple of options. And a level 2 calculated load test is just that. It's the involvement of engineer oversight, reinforcement in lieu of a load test, which is what the country does. In the entire country, what everybody's really doing is what's called opinion tests. And that's a visual opinion, whether it's a drive-by or a real inspection. But otherwise, right now, everybody's pushing towards the load test of being a refurbishment of the fire escape. And why wouldn't you be refurbishing these 50 to 75-year-old fire escapes that have been out there rotting? Who wants to put their name on a piece of paper? The word on every code says test and or examine. Some words use it critically examine, well, the word examine now is under fire. Because if the city's accepting anything that's coming down the pike and not rejecting anything, they're accomplices now and they get sued. So now they want to raise the standard to say, show me your inspection criteria and what it is. And then show me what, in lieu of a load test, how you're going to guarantee me in a certification mode something that makes me feel safe, that the tenants are going to get out and that the firemen are going to go up. And if we've just eliminated the refurbishment will make you feel comfortable enough to say that a certification because you refurbished it and you oversaw, including the unknowns, and that's the connections into the wall, and one more connection. I got an all-welded fire escape. Do you think I have a certification anywhere on file from that fire escape that was welded 25 to 50 years ago? And I'm going to point this question out to you guys there. None of the connections are bad. They're all very good connections. Sealed, painted, x-ray the connection, or because that's what fell on that other piece of angle. The water actually got in, and the water rotted the well from the inside out. So it didn't fall off; it broke off from that severe trauma of two months worth of activity. But if I have a welded fire escape, and I just go in on every rail, every tread, every connection, and I blow a bolt through it, or 2 bolts, depending on the structural. Will you sign off on that fire escape, on the certification, if I reinforce every welded connection? I keep it, I don't cut it out, I don't change it, and I even go one step further. I have welded connections that are open, I'm going to seal it with silicone and blow my 2 bolts. Now what's my primary?
Primary rear bolts.
The secondary now becomes my weld. Will you certify that fire escape in lieu of a load test?
Generally speaking, yeah. That sounds like.
That's what we're looking at, is to take the unknowns. And the only 2 unknowns we have, because 97% of your fire escape is outside your building. You can see every piece of a fire escape. What you don't see is going into the wall. Well, we've identified the epoxy or that shelf angle clip that you generate that basically ties it in, right? Feel comfortable with that? To nullify the unknown into the building, let sleeping dogs lie, or you want to stop blasting buildings open?
Well, I never choose to blast a building open with load test before that because it's just so disruptive and invasive.
And expensive.
Yeah.
But this epoxy bolt duplication, does it make sense or no, it doesn't make sense?
There are some real problems when you have like the 2 wife plus the space plus the outside wife trying to get an anchor in there.
And I have an answer for that. Whenever that occurs, we're just going to backplate it. We're going to skip the whole epoxy bolt thing. We're just going to backplate it. We're going to put a bolt through it, and on the back is some plate that we got to bury in the wall. So I'm not saying that epoxy bolt is the only answer on a masonry building. On average, the masonry will take an epoxy bolt, on average. But when it doesn't, I'm going to sandwich it. Do you feel comfortable with a sandwich or an epoxy?
Sandwich with a plate on the inside?
Yeah.
Interior side?
Yeah, on the interior side.
Well, then you got to get in people's office space.
That's not my problem. I got a building I got to certify. It's not my problem. Don't shoot the vet. I'm the solution guy here. We'll try not to get into your building, but otherwise, if I have to bury this plate inside your wall,
Yeah.
it's their money. It's their sheetrock they got to deal with. It's their answer, not mine.
It's still probably cheaper and easier to load test.
Well, there you go. Whatever's cheaper to the client, load testing or refurbishing the fire escape. So can you fix the entire fire escape and still load test it to satisfy the wall issue?
Fix the entire.
Yeah, you're going to still fix you still got to change all the bad bolts and everything. But now, how are you going to verify before you load test it whether or not you got any rotted connections into the building? Do you do any sample testing of the connections? You open them up, any of them, to see how rotted they are inside? Have you ever done that?
No. We did it once.
Yeah, we recommend it highly, because a lot of times you're gonna be very amazed when you start drilling, and usually you take a 3/4 hammer drill, and right next to the angle of the C channel, I mean, literally right next to it, you're kind of leaning into it all the time, you just blast a hole down the whole length of it. And then we take that little thing you buy at Home Depot, that little 3-foot snake with a light on it, and it takes pictures. You get those for about $200-300, and you just stick it down the hole, and I got some photos here. You just snap some shots all the way down, you just identify that there's no deterioration all the way in. If the city officials allow you to basically sample, you got 20 of them, and you sample, 7 of them or whatever at various floors, to identify that there's no water penetration, that's what you're really trying to identify. Then you just repack those holes.
Typically, you get your condition of your grout anyway, your obvious rust condition on here is already found in the survey properly. So if it's not an obvious problem of the building falling apart, why would you want to penetrate all the way inside the wall, take pictures while it's inside the wall?
Because I used to be one guy that used to think exactly like you until I started seeing some of these things, because you cannot see from the veneer side, you cannot see just how horrible things are behind there, because a lot of times when there is a water buildup of any kind, it's inside the cavity between the veneer and the actual masonry wall, and it's not spewing out and blowing out your veneers. So you got this false sense that you've got something there. And my photograph that I showed you at the beginning is an actual 20-story building that actually passed the initial test. But then the masonry guy says, listen, let me do some sampling in here, only to find out there was garbage behind there. Yet none of the engineers, none of the architects, nobody picked up, not even the fire escape inspector said, oh, because we were looking for what the telltale sign, dragon's teeth. We were looking for that rust. But in order for that rust to come out through the veneer, there's got to be no cavity between the two. Otherwise, if there is any rust or growth of any kind going on, it's falling behind the veneer. It's not giving us one of our visuals. So the only way we can basically nullify the connection or verify a connection is we got to drill a hole, either in all of them or sampling, to basically prove that there's no water. Otherwise, you're taking a risk by load testing something without verifying the connections into the wall. Because I know what a pass looks like. You know what a failure looks like? It's catastrophic. But my thing is, if you're going to drill that hole anyway, if it's $250 a connection to verify a wall connection with a mason guy, it's $25 to $50 to put an epoxy bolt and or a through bolt plate. You know what I'm saying? You just nullify. I don't want to. You let sleeping dogs lie. I don't care how rusty it is in the wall anymore, because that usually opens up another can of worms inside there. So we're just going to basically, to nullify this hidden concern, we're going to backplate it, and we're going to through bolt it with epoxy. And then for any weld, any and all welds, because of what happened in Chicago, whether it looks good or it looks bad. If it looks bad, we're going to clean it out anyway and rebolt it. We never re-weld it. But if it looks good, we still back up every weld with a bolt. Okay? Let's continue. Any more questions so far? I hope we're learning a couple of things here. Look how much rust is sitting on that step. This is 2 years later on that investigation we did. And obviously, as we were going up the fire escape, treads were falling from under our feet. So what they do when they fix that fire escape, they only fix the 3 treads that the firemen fell through. Right after this investigation, they quickly settled. And the guy saw the exposure that he had. This wasn't an accident that occurred to a fireman. This is negligence. So if you got a fire escape that you haven't fixed in 25 plus years, and your firemen fall through it, we have an accident, or we have a neglect case. So, because sometimes these guys fall through, they get injured, and you know how well they're taking care of the rest of their lives? Not very. But if you can prove negligence in any case, you can step outside and sue directly. If you can show that somebody has not been maintaining their fire escapes for 50 years plus. So I tell this to a lot of people, if you know anybody that's been hurt on a fire escape for any reason, and they still have back pain, or they were permanently crippled, I don't know if there's usually a 7-year rule before you can, go back, but let's take a look at now. This is every fire escape in the United States is built this way. These are drawings, that are just samples. Okay? At the end, I'm going to go back into this in a second, but a lot of the stuff is right on here.
And all these,
Every fire escape is built this way. Okay? Good.
And these are all accessed off the internet, all these diagrams here.
Again, on our website, if you go to firescapeservices.com, we have a lot of videos there, and we're populating this into one of the libraries in there, but it's not there yet, but otherwise, by calling me, I can get you a lot of this information. So, as I mentioned before, every masonry building that doesn't have a through bolt is this way, 8 to 12 inches into the wall. Not that the veneer is nothing but the veneer, but it's always 8 to 12 inches, pocketed in there, there's no cross steel or anything, it's just a piece of steel, T-bars usually, or angles, just packed in there, and they pack it with cement. Got it? That's a single, that has no diagonal brace of any kind. That's what they look like. Water gets in there, starts rusting those out, and if the water can get back there, rust jacking causes you to blow out all the bricks. This is all rust jacking. It'll snap all kinds of bricks, cause all kinds of structural cracks. Am I correct?
No, water freezing does that.
Water freezing also so the water gets in it, through freeze and thaw, it starts expanding and blowing the thing out. Correct? What's the terminology for freeze and thaw? What's the
Ice jacking.
guys, I'm learning something new every day. Rust jacking, ice jacking. Thank you very much. We make light of it, but this is how you learn. This is how everybody learns, and I'm here to pass on what I've learned, because nobody wants to pass this information on, you know what I'm saying? And that's what we're trying to do. This is being recorded, by the way. This is also live on the internet. Again, our office down in LA is watching this through WebEx, up to 25 people. And this is getting recorded here, getting recorded there. So actually, if anybody wants to see this class on the link, whether through our WebEx or through the video, just make sure you leave me some cards, because this will be used for future training. Because there's always somebody that wants to watch this class. So, support problem here. See the support diagonal here? Is this supposed to have a support diagonal holding a staircase? Holding two staircases? You think a single arm buried 8 to 12 inches can handle 2 full staircases? Supposed to have a brace there. But the quick answer here is you can also put a leg to the ground. But a lot of times it looks like somebody did some work here, and what used to be here, they took it out. But you overload that staircase, firemen and people, what comes down? Firemen and people. And steel. Don't forget the steel. Gotta get steel that's credit. All right, guys. The same piece now with a jack. With a brace. A lot of them tie back into the building. And guess what happens when the water comes down this every day? Guess what it does? Drives water into the building. The gusset at the top. If you look at the gusset right now, that's something we're going to show you. These gussets that are either single bolt or they're going to be 4 bolt, 6 bolt. These gussets are the only thing holding this on the top there. And this is what that looks like when you drive water into the building. Now, if I don't want to drive water into the building anymore, I can basically repack this or cut this away. Can I put a piece of angle on the outside of this and bolt it to the angle and secure it so that it doesn't go back into the building anymore? On the bottom of the brace, on. Sure. So to stop driving water into your building, you can get these out of the building by doing this on the bottom of the angle, okay? This is that other thing you mentioned. I believe this is actually some buildings down here in either Seattle or Portland or Tacoma. And this is exactly what you were talking about. That some of them actually come in. It's a masonry block building, and it's not cemented into the 8 to 12 inches deep. It's actually, there's a through bolt of some kind that came into the building. Well, here it is. And guess what it does? If it doesn't have a proper plate back here, what's it do to the brick? It crushes the bricks, it pushes the bricks. And the mortar, look at all the pressure on this stupid thing, right? So, 3 ways. And I'm going to cover it. It's cemented into a masonry block wall, and that's 80-90% of all the buildings in the United States. It's 8 to 12 inches deep only. That's where the water gets to it. 5 to 10% of them are like this on masonry block walls. 5 to 10. I expect enough of them. I don't see this very often.
They're also through bolted, but not through both veneers. Say there's an exterior veneer and an interior veneer of brick. They will go through the exterior brick and then into the framing, and then with a big huge washer and a nut, and they lock that all in. Then they do their brick veneer on the inside, so you can't even see the connection.
Well, see, that's the whole thing. That's their job, is to verify. It's not your job. Your job is either verify or nullify that. So if you can't go, it's going to cost you $300 to go look for it, but it's going to cost you $50 to nullify it, then just do the epoxy.
Unless
Then
it's
epoxy
a
bolt
rest
can't
of-
do it, then it's gonna be another through bolt that you can do. You can do a through bolt anywhere you want that's in your favor, and then make a mechanical connection back to the system. So don't put it where it has to be, you can put it anywhere it needs to be, and then mechanically fasten back to the system, above, below the line of the floor. How about this one? Some of these washers are too small, they start crushing the brick. How about these, huh? Anybody ever want to grow ferns and stuff? How much water you need in order to have that much moss growing? I think this is Seattle, one of their major theaters. Water is very destructive. This is a gusset, 1 inch thick. How long? Unchecked? 1 inch. And this is a Boston library. Those bolts that are still there, they're doing anything?
Waiting for the fall.
Again, if you're looking to open up a garden, fire escapes are good for growing ferns. Because you got the constant water, so in case you're growing a plant that needs a lot of moisture, grow them on the bottom end of the fire escape. I have a photograph that I can't find, but I was doing an inspection at a university, and I'm going up the fire escape, and I got a dead squirrel, just laying there on a tread, because he fell off the roof, landed on another, and then landed on the fire escape, and I took his photograph and saying that, fire escapes kill squirrels too, but I can't find the photograph. But it's, another way that fire escapes get is legs to the ground. The building is a leg, the leg is a leg, we got a bridge. So that's another way that fire escapes is called legs to the ground. Now, when you have legs to the ground, a lot of times you don't have to bury it into the wall. You don't have to do the whole through bolt, you don't have to bury it 8 to 12 inches. You can actually have a lag bolt of some kind, or I got corrected one time. Lag screws and through bolts. There's no such thing as a lag bolt. Yeah, we're gonna write that up, send something to Stu saying these guys. I had, just last week, a guy came up and I have to correct you. There's no such thing as a lag bolt. I said, okay, thank you. But you can, with a lag screw, maybe a 5 inch or an 8 inch, you basically, or a sleeve anchor of some sort, you can get in here with a sleeve anchor because you don't have to do this. Because this is a leg, the building's a leg, you got a bridge, okay? And this is usually sitting on a pier of some kind, a footing of some kind, depending on your frost issues, 2 to 4 feet below frost line, okay? And that's what it looks like. So see how it's like, it's like screwed into the building with either an epoxy, not epoxy, usually an expansion bolt of some kind. That's allowable. Otherwise, you can never expansion bolt or lag bolt a fire escape to a building if it's going to be suspended. But as soon as you put a leg on it, then that can stay. Okay? And this one has its legs. This is what it looks like when it's hit by trucks or just the kind of damage that you get. Now this is all veneer damage right now because, when you smash it, the veneer is the weakest part. It'll just pop all the veneer. So when you repack this, you got to make sure that it's packed in correctly. Very simple stuff. And then you got your only final one. This is wood structure. Every wood structure, and in some rare cases, a masonry structure will use this. It's a through bolt. On average, it's 3/4, but 5/8 have been used, but it's 3/4 through bolt with a plate on the back, picking up a stud. That's it. Now, every now and then, to know you got a fire escape that was improperly installed, you're going to see not one lag screw. You're going to see 7 of them. And I don't care how many lag screws you put up this thing. Eventually, the water will get to them, soften the wood, and that lag screwed fire escape will just rip off the building. I've gotten to some situations where this is a situation and there's all screws and I can't get on the inside because they've got plumbing, they've got something obstructing. What's the fix for that? I take that wood structure and as soon as I put a leg on the nose to the ground, I've just eliminated the need for a through bolt. So any badly installed fire escape that's lag screwed into a building, as soon as you put a leg on the nose, you're good again. Because now the building is a leg, and the new support on the nose is a leg. You got a bridge. Everybody clear on that? Okay.
Presuming the ledger is okay.
On what, how it's cited? Obviously, yeah, that's, your job is to fix the fire escapes, because somebody else is gonna put they're gonna verify or nullify, or duplicate the connection. Or totally replace the whole fire escape.
Okay, and when you first stated, you said about deflection, so as you're load testing, you're saying you measure for deflection on the fire escape, so now you're testing the wood structure.
Yeah,
Obviously, we've overstressed them to see if we can get it to break in hand. And we've had deflection to show that it's in a stud with a 4x behind there. So as you're trying to measure deflection, what are you getting at with that, since the deflection's in the stud, not in the actual, you see where I'm going with that?
that, on the masonry buildings, we were, the group we use out of Seattle is Engineers Northwest. They're licensed in 40 states, and that's who we use to get our criteria. Deflection is no more than 3/16, and you'd be amazed that it won't deflect. You know, on a steel structure, it won't even deflect. A 16th or an 8, you can't even, but like anything else, those things. On the wood, you're the one that's gonna be coming in to determine, because if you're doing a load test on a wood structure, you're gonna determine whether the wall was built correctly, and a lot of that is destructive, invasive view of what you got for a wall. Is it properly nailed in? And in some cases, you're gonna have to avoid destruction. You're gonna have to go in with that little monitor again and blow a little 1/2-inch hole and drive your little camera that they sell at Home Depot now for $300 and do what? And start identifying in the cavity, you know, with these little holes on the entire wall if there's a fire escape on the outside of that. And you're basically doing your best to say, hey, you know, we're gonna get a deflection because your inspection criteria goes to Stu. And you tell them what you are comfortable with. And whether or not a 1/2 inch or more is gonna be your deflection because the wood is deflecting, not anything else. Then of course, but again, every now and then, you're gonna be looking at a wall. And that's why we talked about 25 years, you have wall studies. So once you do these load tests, you're not due for another load test for another 25 years, but it's not a fire escape test anymore. It's a wall test that your fire escape's attached. So it's an entire envelope study of that piece of the building that has the fire escape to determine whether or not we've got cement problems, wood rot, you know, carpenter ants, you name it. You know, there's many things that will determine whether or not you can safely load test the fire escape. Otherwise, you put legs to the ground, and guess what you've just eliminated?
Can you define deflection?
Can you define deflection? These are the rust jacking guys, ice jacking guys, they want you to define deflection.
Use the word deflection. Movement, bending. You know, how far are you pointing on this?
Actually, the fire escape wanting to move down, the deflection of actual the landing moving.
So the part that you're load testing, you take an initial measurement, what's its current grade, throw the load on it, and then measure the deflection under load, and then when released, you measure again, right? You actually get 3 measurements on that?
Right, deflection should be a non-permanent change in the measurement.
Right,
It's
yeah,
how
so
it,
you don't
how
go
it
past.
moves according to stress. If it changes and stays deflected, it's been deformed and you have a different problem.
Yeah.
You failed your load test at that time.
Because now you got a piece of steel that's actually, what's the word when it's got a problem? Fatigue, a fatigue piece. But a piece of steel sticking in the wall, they want to load test it without any braces or anything. They're load testing it this way. They can't deflect more than 3/16 of an inch if it's in the masonry building. But he's saying that on a wood structure, you might get a 1/2 inch deflection. But it really means nothing about the fire escape. It's just that the wall gave with it. So he has to do his calculations to say, hey, the fire escape is still good. The deflection we got that was out of the norm actually came from the wall deflecting, but we've investigated the wall on the inside and identified that it's in very good condition, or he might identify the wall and say, hey, it's full of carpenter ants in here. We're not gonna load test this thing because even though the fire escape's in great condition, as soon as we load test, we're gonna rip this thing right off the wall because all the studs are now eaten because termites and carpenter ants got in there. That's their job. All right. All the fire escapes have just been identified. Anybody know of any other way to build a fire escape or attach it to a building? Other than the illegal way of putting it in with lax screws. That's it.
Cisco, the one version for attachment and support that you didn't hit, we've got the 45-degree leg, which is a normal platform support device. But for the lower platforms, we've got a couple of them that were engineered with support rods going up and taking the load to the deck above.
Yeah, that happens. You could basically have a fire escape where they couldn't tie it up above, and they basically just put it on stilts. that what you're saying?
No.
Or is it hanging from it?
This
Oh,
is-
hangers, yeah, reverse. It's a reverse
Hanging it out
cantilever,
instead of
reverse,
running
yeah.
it.
If for some reason, and that happens a lot on the pivot of the cantilever, where they have no room below because there's a big window, so they go above it, and they put in, they do this through bolt thing, or a box, or a cement thing, and they basically hang from the nose a rod of some kind that comes down and picks up the pivot point or picks up another angle below, so that trucks don't hit anyone. Of course, it's done all the time. As a matter of fact, to avoid trash trucks smashing into a lot of the legs down below, which is a common thing, you remove all the legs. Up above, you basically double up your entire support structure up there, then you start hanging suspenders down and you pick up everything. You just eliminated the crash factor. Done all the time. But again, you can't suspend two original ones without doubling them up. You gotta double them up, because now you're holding two platforms. So it's just an engineering answer. And that's what stops these things from crushing. Cantilevers. That's what a release arm looks like. It's permanently in your way. It blocks your way, this release arm. These are handmade. You make these. It's nothing but a rod. It's an L. It's not a depending, but it's basically a line, comes down and comes back. Let's show you what one looks like. There it is. Pretty simple, isn't it? Doesn't let it go up. If it gets out of balance, doesn't let it go down. Keeps you trying to pull it down and break into the building. And the rod that comes right by the beginning of your stair, because a lot of times you have 5 staircases to go down. As soon as you release it up here, by the time you hit the ground, it's already in a down position. Drops, hits the ground, and stays down. So it's a permanent bar, single action requiring no special knowledge. You just push it away. And by the time you walk down 3 steps, 5 steps, it's already boom, 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 and already hits. It'll usually bounce 2 or 3 times on the ground anyway. Release arm. Can I break into the building? No. Only activated by the tenants. What this is? I don't know. Truck smashes, you get all kinds of crazy things that happen. Okay? And I believe there's a release arm over there that's all bent. Trash truck hits? Look at them. Catastrophic. By the way, ready? Trash truck riding down. This owner has never maintained his fire escape in his lifetime. Trash truck does this to his fire escape. You know what we call that in the industry? Fire escape lottery ticket. Guess who's going to fix it now? It's got to be brought back to operational condition. So do I just fix this cantilever down here? Or do I have to fix the entire thing? It must be brought back to operational condition. Guess who's paying that? Engineers. I just ripped this thing. How many floors did I affect when I pulled it, got jammed in it, pulled back, got jammed in it, pulled away, and I'm trying to get out of there because I'm a trash guy and I don't need another hit on my license, you know? And I run out of there. How many floors did I affect in this fire escape that's all interlocked? And I pulled and pulled. How many floors did I affect?
Based on how good your lawyer is. A lot.
The important point here is that you basically have had a domino effect on the entire fire escape. Every bolt on that fire escape, every bolt is suspect now. And usually it's about 3 to 5 floors from a smash. That everything must be rebolted. But it's a fire escape lottery ticket. This is a fire escape lottery ticket. Staircases. A lot of fire escapes have top clips and bottom clips. A lot of them have top clips, but no bottom clips. They have a notch. You need the bottom notch. You need the bottom clip. Why? To make it all work together. Simple. How simple is it to put a clip? The notch is kind of loose. If they loose up front, what can happen at the bottom? Nothing. As soon as you notch it at the top, notch it at the bottom, clip it, top and bottom. The tops fail. What's the bottom's doing? Holding it in place. So you need to have bolting up there, and you need to have bolting down here. This is what happens in a lot of your clips at the top of the stringer. So not only your staircase bad, now your whole staircase is bad. And if they don't have any bottom clipping, this thing can slip away, so the entire staircase can fall down. How about that?
Doesn't look good.
Well, you won't see it because you're a fireman coming in the middle of the night and there's all smoke. How about that? Am I looking at 25 years, 50 years of neglect?
More.
When treads start falling by themselves and there's holes in the flap and in the stringers, how many years of neglect? Moving trucks backing up. Look how much rust is out there. Who didn't see this for the longest time? I mean, this thing has been like this for 25 years. How many building inspections happened that nobody ever walked in the back and said, what's going on with the fire escape in the back? Some of your railings are also tied in this way, but you can also change it over to a simple bolt if you want. Just to keep water from getting into your building. This is notorious. A lot of buildings have flats, and some have gradings. In your area, believe me, everything's usually flats. Very, very little use of grading. We recommend grading because snow can't sit on a 1/4 inch. On flats, you know how much snow accumulates here after, you know what the law is? I have to go out there after a snowstorm and do what? Where do I put the snow? 10-story building, right? Over sidewalk.
You aim for the
Right?
border.
Now you got ice, you got, anybody doing that? Any maintenance guy going out there and shoveling this place? No?
You can't get out there fast enough for the shovel before the rain is taken care of.
It's nice to be in Portland.
It's nice to be in Portland. Rust grows between the steel and the, these will eat your, the sandwiches. Some even down then you have flat railings and steel supports that make a sandwich. That's what they make. Beautiful rusty sandwiches. Rust jacking, some cases, ice jacking. Rust jacking, some cases, ice jacking. Slight earthquakes, exits to the side. Treads, as you guys can see, a lot of the treads nationwide are with these spacers. These spacers all run out. They're on the treads and on the grading.